Okay, well, we cleared our first technical hurdle, which is always interesting, which is to see whether or not I can even get this webinar system to switch on. It seems to have switched on. So, a little housekeeping and maintenance prior to getting started. First off, do me a favor and type something into the chat bar, if you can find the chat bar, and let me know that you can hear me. There should be a chat window on the right side of your screen. And if that is working, then you should be able to type in there and say, hey man, I can see you, I can hear you, which hopefully you can. Unfortunately, I hate being this guy, but I am somewhat famous for technical glitches in these webinars, but I have a second camera. Hi, Tiffany. That means I guess you can hear me. Dane, hi, great. All right, thank you. Good. So there's a lot of shit that can go wrong with interwebs and with this little thing in my ear. I've got a secondary microphone. I've got a secondary camera. So all of this good stuff is going to end up, in decent video. It'll all get edited together, and it'll all be yours. And if necessary, if for some reason halfway through you get dropped off, I get dropped off, this is going to get done, and we'll do another session with Q&A as necessary. But my hope is that we're going to get through this one with fewer technical glitches than usual. In the end, it always works out, though, so don't sweat it. You might hear my 2-year-old scream in the other room. I'm hoping we won't get distracted by that. And other than that, I think we are pretty much ready to get rolling. So I'm going to do a little introduction to the program, and then I'm going to introduce the topic of the day. I'll take Q&As probably at the end throughout if it's possible. Got a lot to cover, so I should kind of get rolling, but I think you're going to really dig what I've got in store for you today. I was working on it right up until like a minute ago, and I'm pretty pleased with what we got here. So, all right. Welcome to the Sexual Communication course. In this class, I want to try and create for you a program that is going to help you in a very specific kind of communication, which is communication between two people who have some kind of sexual relationship or would like to have some kind of sexual relationship, or there's something sexual happening, which is, it's different from average everyday communication. Average everyday communication might be something like, hi, yes, I'd like some fries with that, or putting your blinker on to change lanes. There's all these ways in which we communicate, and usually with very little problem. Usually it's pretty simple to communicate human to human, but there's this thing that can really complicate it, which is sex. And part of the reason that sex and sexual attraction and an ongoing sexual relationship complicates communication is because all of that animal stuff around sexuality occurs in a completely different part of the brain than the sex stuff does. So the sex stuff doesn't really lend itself well to our normal modes of communication. It has its own language, and that language is pretty simplistic. It doesn't really handle a lot of the complexities of our modern world. So who the class is for is basically anyone who wants to get more from their relationship with the opposite sex, and to get what you want with the opposite sex, which a lot of people are very frustrated by getting what they want from the opposite sex. There's a real sense of, I could be failing at this, like I'm just not good at it, and I don't get what I want, or I don't get it the way I want it. So to be able to achieve success in this area is not a given. And in fact, in my observation, and admittedly, I live in this bubble where people come to me for advice around this stuff. So it seems to me everybody that I talk to is screwed up about it. But also even my close friends, even people who have really nice relationships, they struggle. This stuff is not super simple for most of us. So the second thing is to have some control over your sexual communication and your sexual relationships, because Again, a lot of this seems out of our control. It just kind of seems like you get what you get, and there's not a ton of space for you to change your luck, your destiny. It is what it is. We're either hot for each other or we're not. He likes me or he doesn't like me. She's not into me. She is into me. We have no power. We have no say over what happens. Oh, it looks like my marriage is slowly running out of gas, and there's just nothing I can do about it. But that's not necessarily true. Maybe there is something you can do about it. I'd like to try and give you more power over these situations that we feel very powerless in. And then, of course, the ultimate goal is to reach a deeper understanding of each other, really like getting each other and really feeling like we've been gotten, which is fucking hard. And it's the essence of what a great relationship is you really feel like we get each other. This person gets me and I really get them, and deeply connecting on what's real and not just what's wishful thinking about each other. We're really connecting and being on the same page. So there are certain limitations to sexual communication, which is that this is not a course on, negotiation or getting what you want when they don't want it. There's no tricks or manipulation that I'm going to share with you that are going to, get you what you want when somebody else doesn't want it. This is not about, trapping the guy who, because now he thinks that you're this thing that you're not, or getting the girl into bed who, otherwise would never be with a guy like you. That's not what this is. There are limitations around this. This is really about getting clarity and getting good at not screwing it up, which is normally what's happening. I mean, normally if you're not getting the guy or you're not getting the girl or your marriage isn't working the way you want to, it's because you're screwing it up. It's not really because the other person is evil or they don't like you for some, other reason. So I think this does have the power to get you most of what you want. The other piece that I really want to warn you about, and I'm going to probably give warnings throughout, is that a lot of this stuff I've discovered as I've been teaching more and more people over the years is really, it's easy to weaponize the things that you learn in any kind of relationship class and in my classes as well, where, well, Alex said, you have to remain open and you're not being open, so it's your fault. I mean, that's not obviously what I have in mind. So just be careful about your mind wandering to weaponization. Like if you're married and you're like, yeah, my wife does this wrong all the time, or yeah, my husband needs to hear this because he's fucking it up, then you're not getting what I'm talking about. Like if you feel yourself going down that road, just know this is not meant to be weaponized. It doesn't really function that way. That's not really what it's about. So just a little forewarning about that. Also, I should mention that if you have some of my other programs, some of this stuff necessarily overlaps, which I think is a good thing because hearing it again is helpful. You may be like, yeah, I saw that in that other program. That's essential in a way because some people will only get this program, and I don't want to leave out pieces and go, well, for more information on that, purchase my other program. That's so there's going to be a little bit of overlap as necessary. But I'm trying to really recontextualize it so that you get new understandings of the content that you may have already seen. And of course, I can't recommend enough the other programs that this will overlap with: Passion Attraction That Lasts, Catch, which are for men, and Revolutionary Sex for Her for women, to get a more fundamental understanding of more areas that you can go into that are more specific on specific things like meeting women or recovering your marriage from a lack of passion and that kind of thing. So the basic curriculum that we're going to cover in this course are the first, the fundamentals of sexual polarity, which is the essence of what makes sexual attraction. And if sexual attraction isn't happening, then all the rest of it kind of gets rendered irrelevant. Like either you've got this sexual connection or you're just friends. And when you're just friends, communication is different. If you're just friends but you wish there was a sexual connection, well, now sexual polarity is really going to be an important thing for you to get good at. And all of these sessions that we're going to do are interrelated, and they build upon each other and they reference each other. And the whole thing ultimately, I think, is going to wrap up into a neat bow and give you an entirely new skill set around this stuff. Because the second thing, which really figures a lot into being good at sexual polarity, is dealing with your own neediness and insecurity in sexual communication. Neediness and insecurity is, something that we're all pre-wired with. We can't help it. It's part of being a human, and it gets in the way. If you don't have good perspective on it, you don't know how to manage it. Then we're going to talking about things that are hard to talk about. Now, when a doctor has to talk about things that are hard to talk about because he has to give his patient bad news, that's the thing that's hard to talk about. But we're going to, again, we're really diving directly into the things that are hard to talk about for couples, for relationships, whether that's, we're friends, but I wish we had a sexual relationship, or, hey, I'm attracted to you, which is a hard thing to say sometimes, or, I don't like our sex life and I want to change it. These things are very, very difficult to say to your lover or to, a stranger that you just met, and you feel like you're trying to overcome a hurdle of courage because it's a hard thing to talk about. Getting your partner to open up is a special case of something hard to talk about. Finding out what they want without invoking neediness and without being weird, without making them feel like, what do you mean you don't know what I want? Or, there's all this stuff about getting your partner to open up from the first moment that it becomes a romance, that first kiss, all the way until, your grandparents together. It can be hard to get your partner to open up. And in many ways, it gets harder as time goes on. It's sometimes easier to talk about these things with somebody who's a relative stranger than it is somebody who's got like a lot of dirt on you already. And then finally, the last part is about becoming the kind of person that attracts love, passion, and devotion from another person. And really, all of these other topics are what does that. But there are special ways of communicating, of using sexual communication, that make people really want to fall in love with you and stick around and recognize that when they're with you, they're their very best selves. And it's really hard to walk away from a relationship that brings out your very best self. So that's what we're going to talk about to kind of wrap the whole thing up. So now let's get into the first session. I guess I'll do a little introduction for this, as I might edit these videos into 2 videos. So, welcome to Sexual Communication, the fundamentals of sexual polarity. We are going to talk about this thing called sexual polarity that is wildly misunderstood, massively abused in our culture, and super crucial to being a human and having a sexual relationship. Sexual polarity is where attraction comes from. It's that pull between the masculine and the feminine. And the masculine and the feminine in this case is not necessarily referring to the gender you were born with. My courses basically speak to, I guess what you would, if you were super lefty political correct about it, would be, the cis normative, whatever, standard straight couple. But that doesn't mean that a gay couple, a trans couple, or sexually ambiguous couples can't use this information about sexual polarity, because it's pretty universal. If there's going to be sexual attraction, there's going to be sexual polarity. Without sexual polarity, there is no sexual attraction, which is fine. And actually, there are some extremely sexually neutral people who are couples who can sexually experience pleasure without attraction, vibrators, and they can get each other off, and they can perform sex acts in a strictly for the pleasure way without really feeling this like sizzle and play in between them. And that's cool. That's nothing wrong with that. But if you find that you have some self-identification with being masculine or feminine, and you're attracted to the opposite of that, whether you're a man who's attracted to man or a woman that's attracted to a woman, or you're a straight couple, then your attraction is caused by this pull, and it's more than pleasure. There's an attraction, there's a sizzle, there's a dance, there's this something in the air between you that is undeniable. It's powerful. It's biological, and that's what we're going to talk about here. And I'm not going to every time give examples for gay and bi, and because first of all, I don't have enough experience with it. I'm personally straight. The vast majority, though not all, but the vast majority of my clients are straight. I guess there's quite a few people that are bi, but I don't feel like I'm qualified to talk about all the other possibilities that are out there. While I do, completely accept and validate your lifestyle, I'm going to do my examples basically around the sort of cis normative whatever straight couple because it's convenient for me to do so and because I know more about it. Okay, so I think let's begin with a quote, and I'm going to do a little PowerPointy thing. Looks like there's no new comments, which is good. Nobody's dropped off the call and saying, oh my God, help. So let's get into a little this on and put that on and share. All right, here we go. So I first heard about this idea of sexual polarity, and a lot of people today have their major idea about sexual polarity because of a guy named David Data. He's the author of a book called The Way of the Superior Man and Blue Truth and a few other really fantastic books on sexual polarity and sexual relationships. And I just can't recommend it enough. He kind of loses a lot of people because he's got a very specifically Eastern philosophical spiritual direction, which you may or may not be into. But he's a great writer, and I recommend his work. And he was the first place where I saw this term sexual polarity, like 20 years ago, or a little more than that. And it really profoundly influenced me, and I've been kind of a student of it since. And he profoundly influenced my thinking around this topic. So I want to begin with what he says, his definition of sexual polarity, taken from The Way of the Superior Man. And Data said, sexual attraction is based on sexual polarity, which is the force of passion that arcs between masculine and feminine poles. All natural forces flow between two poles. The north and south poles of the Earth create a magnetic force. The positive and negative poles of your electrical outlet or car battery create an electrical flow. In the same way, masculine and feminine poles between people create the flow of sexual feeling. This is sexual polarity. That's what David Data says, and it's a pretty solid definition. And I don't know that it's enough to become an expert at it. And I think that that's why we're going to kind of dig in a little more as to how to like do this thing. So let's begin with a little history, or in this case, a little herstory, because it turns out that the history of the term sexual polarity was largely written by women, which I was surprised to find out. In fact, for a long time, I thought that David Data invented the term sexual polarity, but it turns out that is not the case. In fact, when I started digging, the earliest reference that I could find to the term came from a woman named Margaret Fuller. And she wrote about it in her book, The Women of the 19th Century, back in 1845. Now, what's I think particularly interesting about this is that Margaret Fuller was probably, she's the first, she invented feminism. She's the first woman, at least from the standpoint of being an important figure in the public eye and writing. And she's somebody that started a controversy people were talking about in the streets and changed the conversation that we were having around men and women. And one of the things that she talked about was this idea of sexual polarity between men and women. And it's really fascinating where it comes from. And what's more fascinating, the reason I'm sharing with you is because it's applicable. This isn't just like esoteric history to show how smart I am, or so that you can talk about it at a cocktail party. It's actually really relevant. So prior to Margaret Fuller coming along and writing this stuff, there was a common term that was used about the difference between genders, which they referred to it as living in separate spheres. And digging a little deeper, I found out this idea of separate spheres goes all the way back to Aristotle in ancient Greece. And in his model, there were separate spheres that humans dealt with between the home and the city. And these were the separate spheres he was talking about, the home and the city. And somewhere along the line, Aristotle obviously didn't talk about gender differences. Feminism or, male and female energy was not something that concerned him outside of the scientific study of, bugs mating and stuff. So this wasn't really his thing, but his influence was felt so that to the extent that at some point, probably just, around the Industrial Revolution or even just a little before that, people started talking about the separate spheres as referring, not when they said, the city and the home, they were referring to men's work and women's work. And this idea that men and women lived in completely separate spheres of reality, that men had the concerns of men, they were concerned with work and making money and competition and the politics, and women were concerned with raising children and keeping the house clean and cooking. And, this is what they were interested in. It wasn't a matter of discrimination. The fact that women couldn't vote had nothing to do with the fact that they were inferior. Just they were in totally separate spheres. They had nothing to do with political life. They just weren't in that sphere. And Margaret Fuller was the first person who said this separate spheres thing is nonsense. That in fact, we are all of us a play of both masculine and feminine desires. The men really love raising kids and cooking, and that women really have strong political feelings and have something to contribute to public life and life in the city, and earning a living or becoming a writer as she did. And in fact, it was Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was editing a literary magazine at the time, who first published an essay by Margaret Fuller that later became this thing. So it was something that the intelligentsia were already talking about. This was like an idea that was rich and full at the time. So Margaret Fuller said there's no wholly masculine, no purely feminine woman. That we both have both going on, which is absolutely true, and that's both sexually and intellectually and in that kind of sphere of public life and the city. And this idea of sexual polarity was that thing that existed between men and women as our sexual differences. There was a polarity that we find in nature. And by the way, it's interesting that she used this term because electricity had just been discovered. And that was also like a thing that everybody was talking about. Like science was like suddenly a thing. And there was electricity and magnetism this was new stuff. Science had taken this huge leap forward with the Industrial Revolution. And so using this term was not an accident. We were seeing in the natural world all of these new phenomenon that kind of had a balance, like the positive and negative poles of a battery, that created electrical impulse. And she used this metaphor to describe this idea that men and women, it's not just that we were biologically different, such that you could recognize with your eyes, oh, this one has breasts, this one has a penis, but that there was this energetic thing that happened between men and women in sexual relationships, which was sexual polarity. And then there was this other thing completely where we were just people. And so it wasn't that we lived in separate spheres, but that we had separate natures. There was this nature of, we're just people who are participating in the city or the home. And also there's this other piece where we approach each other in a sexual way by gender. And this is really where we're stuck right now in today's world. It's absolutely relevant to exactly where people are going wrong with what sexual polarity is and isn't. So Margaret Fuller said that when describing women, she said we have two sides. There's the Minerva and the Muse. The Minerva was her term for the intellectual side of women, who was concerned with all the things that men are concerned with as an absolute equal. And then the lyrical side, the feminine side, which was the Muse, which was how she showed up with her lover, or how she showed up when she was flirting with some handsome gentleman who was courting her. And there was a clear distinction between these two parts of the woman, not between just men and just women, but that all of us had these distinctions. And this is right on. This is exactly right. And so cut to the next piece of herstory of sexual polarity was Anne Douglas. And I mean, this was probably talked about in all the years intervening, but the two times when it really became a big topic of conversation were back when they were kind of, the suffragettes were saying, hey, we want political power. We're women, we deserve a voice. We don't live in a separate sphere, even though we are sexually different. And then it arises again in 1977 when Anne Douglas wrote this book, The Feminization of American Culture, which launched the men's movement, even though she was a woman. She pointed out that men were becoming so politically correct and gentle, and the sensitive man, and it was kind of killing off a lot of the sexual vibrancy that used to exist between men and women. And she lamented that it was just kind of a reality that men and women were equal, and that we kind of got that now, and that there was the birth control pill, so that women were sexually the same as men. They could be choiceful about whether or not they had children, and the sexual revolution and all this stuff changed, and because women wanted equality, men were like, well, we want to be what women want, and so they started kind of indulging more in their feminine side, and some attraction was lost along the way. But she got it. I think the whole movement from there kind of got derailed because a lot of men thought, well, the antidote to this is just being a whole lot more macho, and women had to be girly, and it's extremely complex in today's world. Even though Margaret Fuller had it simple. She had it simple. It was like, yeah, in our romantic lives, we're this way, and professionally and in friendship, we're the other way. And there was no reason for it to gain this incredible complexity that we now grapple with, where well, women have to choose, what do they want to be, or do men, should they be sensitive or should they be tough, and does it mean that men have to be tough? And this stuff got so convoluted and confusing, but it didn't have to be. And I think ultimately, when Data wrote The Way of the Superior Man in 1991, the world was ready for a better definition, and I think he provided it to an extent. So today's world, we've got a lot of obstacles to enjoying this thing called sexual polarity, being good at it, and like indulging in this form of communication that's beautiful and fun, and this, what Data uses the word tussle, this tussle between the genders, and this kind of fun, ongoing wrestling, tickling, sexually juicy thing that's going on between us. But there's some real obstacles, and the first one is sexual stigmas, because there are, a lot of our society is a little fucked up around sex, and has been for 1,000 years. There's religious stigmas, and there's these social stigmas around slut shaming, or in today's world, huge sexual stigmas around masculine sexuality and being too sexually assertive and sexually aggressive when it's unwelcome. And women are up in arms about that. There's all this hashtag Me Too. And there's some deep, deep misunderstandings about what constitutes kind of normal masculine sexual aggression and really unwelcome, crazy criminal sexual aggression. There's a lot of gray shit in the middle, but it doesn't need to be that gray. It really doesn't need to be that gray. And men are now afraid of, a lot of men are afraid of being labeled some kind of a sexual predator for what's kind of natural and kind of normal and welcome from most women, because they fear that they could be labeled. But it's tough today. It is tough because, if you are attracted to somebody in the workplace, you're on dangerous ground. And I'm not going to get too distracted by that, because that's not what this is seminar is about. But you're on dangerous ground, and that does create an obstacle to sexual polarity in the modern world. And then there's these gender stigmas. Men are called simpletons and cavemen, and they only want one thing, and all men want is sex, and men will lie and say anything to get pussy, and then women are emotional and they're weak, and so if you are interested in sexual polarity as a woman, you want to learn how to be feminine, are you betraying the feminist cause? Are other women going to say, oh, you're being what candy for men rather than being your own person, and you suck, and give me your woman card, and you're setting us back 1,000 years. And so you get these stigmas that, it seems to me, back in 1845, Margaret Fuller had this stuff right. She had this stuff right. And today we've got these gender stigmas that are wrong, and they're hurtful. And we have to recognize that it's entirely possible to be one person in the city and another person at home, and that's okay, that it's totally compatible with our animal nature, our divine nature, and our sexual nature, which are different. So, again, sexual polarity is one of those things that's just easy to weaponize. People weaponize it against each other. Couples weaponize it all the time. I can't tell you how many times a couple has come to me and they said, hey, listen, I need to talk to you because we went to this David Data seminar and we learned all about sexual polarity. And the problem is that I'm not attracted to my husband because he's doing all these things wrong and not being masculine. So it's like, that's not what this is for. Okay? It's not to weaponize against somebody. You're just not doing sexual polarity right. That's not what this is about. And it's one of those things that gets in the way of you doing it successfully. If you want to be successful at creating sexual attraction, then you got to kind of get past, and it's not necessarily going to be easy to get past the sexual stigma of, is it okay for me to be sexual as a man, or am I going to be some kind of revolting pig? Is it okay for me to be sexual as a woman, or am I going to be betraying feminism and acting like some kind of a passive, nincompoop? You're not. These are different things. They're different parts of ourselves, and having the courage to accept the interplay between your parts, the part of you. And by the way, we're good at this in some arenas. Like, we all recognize that a man can be tender and loving to his baby and then go off to war and be a ruthless killer. And that's the same guy. And we don't go, wait, which guy is he? Well, he's both. He's both all right. And but for some reason, when it comes to sex and sexual stigmas and gender stigmas, we get confused. And I'll just tell you right now that if you could just be like, oh, I don't need to be confused about that, you would be doing sexual polarity like 10 times better than you're doing it now. You'd be really good at this attraction game if you just got that you didn't have to be this way all the time or none of the time to be consistent as a person. There's also a lot of group manipulation and justification using sexual polarity. Ever since the 1970s, when there was this idea of well, men are over feminized now. There are all of these groups that have cropped up who are staking claims and saying that, oh, this is bad about men or this is bad about women. And so, for example, as a matter of sexual polarity, David Data and others have written that men are logical and women are emotional, to which a lot of men say, well, you can't trust a woman. She can't be logical and rational. She doesn't mean what she says. She changes her mind a lot, and she's too emotional, and she's going to be hysterical because that's the way women are. So in other words, groups have taken hold of this idea of sexual polarity, and they've weaponized it, and they've used it in a way that is nonsense. There's a lot about being just a normal person. When we say, like normal, not in the sexual realm, a lot of times what we mean is masculine stuff. And that detracts a lot from the value of what the feminine aspects of all of us, the feminine aspects of men and the feminine aspects of women, bring to the table. Because we are not just logical, and logic does not always win the day for us. Sometimes emotion and intuition wins the day for us. And men have emotion and intuition, and women have logic. And when we recognize that within the separate spheres of our sexual life and our life in public, that we all have these tools equally, that women, can frequently be far more effective with logic than men, and men can be more effective with, for example, most successful copywriters whose entire job is appealing to emotion are men. And I mean, there's no reason for that. Obviously, women are equally good at it. It's just the way the dice have fallen. And the last obstacle to sexual polarity is, and you're really getting good at this stuff, is that it's resistant to description using language because it exists in a non-linguistic part of the brain, right? Sexual polarity largely exists in those hemispheres and regions of the brain that are animal and emotional. And the animal brain and the emotional brain, the limbic system and the brain stem, don't have language. They do not have language. So language is how we think. We think in language, not just communicate. We think in language. And it's hard to think about things that you don't have words for. And these parts of our brain don't have language. So when you feel hunger, that feeling doesn't, that place that feeling comes from doesn't have language, but it's connected to the part of the brain that does have language. And then that part, it sends up a signal and goes, feed me. And then it goes, then you say out loud, I'm hungry. And recognizing that these things don't perfectly match up is part of the challenge. So let's talk about what makes, it is so confusing. What is masculine? What is feminine? Like, what are these poles? What is the difference between masculine and feminine? There's a lot of weird misunderstanding around this. And if you want to make sexual polarity happen, and you are somebody with more masculine energy, typically a man, or you're someone with more feminine energy, typically a woman, how do you do femininity? How do you do masculinity in a way that creates this polarity, creates the sexual tension between people? So first of all, it's not gender. I'm not talking about masculine and feminine in terms of gender. Masculine gender means, penis makes sperm, and feminine gender means uterus has eggs, has ova, right? So that's what it means biologically. But we're not talking about that. We're talking specifically about sexual masculine and sexual feminine, meaning this area of ourselves that is guided by pleasure and sexual desire. So I'm not going to use the terms sexual masculine, sexual feminine every time, but it's what we're talking about here. We're actually talking about sexual masculine and sexual feminine. And even that can be confusing because I don't mean sexual in terms of reproduction. I mean it in terms of desire. So we all have both, and balance is important. People who are too masculine lack certain capacities of what it is to be a human, and people who are too feminine lack certain capacities of what it is to be human. And people who are afraid of part of their natural gender also are ineffective. This is more common with men. That men are afraid of their feminine energy. They feel like it's going to make them gay or it's going to make them a fag. And they don't recognize that actually their feminine aspect is terribly important. It's important for nurturing children. It's important for cooperation. It's important for understanding and being a good friend. It's critical. It's crucial. And so it's important to have both. And then, so let's just talk about masculine and feminine. Again, I pulled the definitions out of the dictionary. I thought it'd be interesting, and it is. And it's not bad. It's not totally off. Dictionary says that masculine is having qualities or appearance traditionally associated with men, especially strength and aggressiveness. That is a very limited palette to paint with, but it's not totally off. Strength is really something that we do associate with the masculine, and not just far from just physical strength, though physical strength is masculine. And if you're a man and you want to create sexual attraction with a woman, her noticing that you're physically strong is in the mix. That is masculine. You know, when you can open up the mayonnaise jar or sweep her up off her feet and run up a flight of stairs with her the way Clark Gable famously did with Vivian Leigh in Gone with the Wind, and a generation of women went and swooned. You know, it's in there, but far more to the point is intellectual strength, moral strength, and strength of judgment, strength of character. These things really figure into masculinity, not being easily discouraged. That kind of strength is highly masculine. By the way, it's one of the reasons why highly feminine women, when you first approach them and you say, you know, hi, I saw you from across the room, you've got a beautiful smile, and they're like, whatever, and they kind of try and blow you off, they are testing your strength. It's actually a test of strength sometimes. Now, sometimes it really is a blow off, but actually, when you learn how to be good at the sexual polarity thing, you can feel the difference immediately. Your body knows when she's like, look, my friends and I are talking, I don't have time for this. That's very different from, you know, kind of the blow off that is part of her body's sexual polarity response to your body. And aggressiveness. Again, this is not necessarily aggressiveness as in, you know, punching people in the nose and road rage, but aggressiveness as in being aggressive about leading, going after what you want, creating things, having direction. That's masculine. The definition of feminine, not quite as well done by the dictionary. Having qualities or an appearance traditionally associated with women, especially delicacy and prettiness. It's a little further off. It's a little further off. I mean, delicacy, is that a feminine quality? Maybe. Maybe if they mean delicacy in terms of an aesthetic of movement, or I don't know. I'm really struggling to make this work. Prettiness of certainly being physically attractive as a woman or physically attractive as a man are masculine and feminine cues that other humans pick up on easily, no matter how dense, you know, or thick-headed we are. We can't help but notice that. It's just so obvious. But again, prettiness of an internal aesthetic, like strength in men, maybe closer to the point of what feminine is. So let's see if we can get some better definitions going. Here's one that I really like. There's a really common wrong interpretation of masculine and feminine as being masculine being intellectual and the feminine being rational, and that's bullshit. But often they'll say the masculine is intellectual and the feminine is emotional. It's closer, but the truth is masculine and feminine have nothing to do with intellectual. When you're being intellectual, you're being neither, for sure. Intellectual is 100% neuter. And it will not work in the sexual communication of sexual polarity. However, masculine is rooted in the survival brain. Survival brain to protect the family, survival brain to reproduce the species. That's where sexual aggression comes from. This idea that I gotta go have some sex with that because the brain stem, the reptilian brain, our oldest survival brain, the thing that won't let you hold your breath for too long, the thing that gets hungry, and the thing that wants sex, that part of you is your masculine energy. You may notice that if you're a woman, you have all those things. You're wired in with them too. And you may notice that if you're a man, you have emotions too. So again, we are absolutely balanced creatures. But when you are in that survival brain place, that animal brain of, you know, proactively, aggressively looking for food and sex and protecting the family and making strong alliances with other strong men to protect the community at large and to protect your family and this kind of stuff, that is masculine. And when you're in your emotional brain, and the emotional brain was designed because we are social animals. So it was designed specifically to cue in on what's going on with the other animals within our tribe and in our group. It's a very specific kind of communication that allows for pair bonding, for falling in love and bonding with your child, so that even though they cry and go crazy and can't talk for a year, you don't just throw them somewhere in the woods and run away because they're a pain in the ass. No, you love them. That emotional brain that creates the context of being a human and creates all of our interpersonal bonds, that is the feminine. Let's dig deeper. We're getting to the part that words aren't so good to describe. Like I said, these parts of the brain don't have language, and language is not a great way of describing it, but that's what I'm stuck with here. So stick with me for a minute. The masculine has to do with solidity, by which I mean integrity, trustability, steadfastness, perseverance. The masculine is solid and grounded. And when you're in that space as a man, if you're trying to do sexual polarity with a woman and you're trying to make that attraction thing happening, you can literally just feel the ground under your feet and take a more solid stance. Don't rock back and forth so much. Just kind of be solid, and she'll feel it. She'll literally feel it. If she says something that might knock you off your horse, these sort of wired in tests that women throw at men. If she throws you one of those tests, being solid in the face of that, not getting emotionally upset, not being kind of collapsing and wimpy if she rejects you, but being solid and having your own stuff handled, being truthful, not trying to put up a front or a lie or an act, which people can smell. They really can. They can forgive because we all have that, but they can smell it, and it's not masculine. That solidity is masculine. And now the feminine, David Data used the word radiance. I'm going to use it too. But again, linguistically, it's a little dicey. And by radiance, he meant aliveness, this energetic flow, this sense of not the prettiness that the dictionary meant of physicality, but the prettiness of spirit, the sweetness that is energetic that we can feel. And bear with me because I'm going to try and put this into better languaging for you. The masculine, integrity, strength, toughness, mental toughness is a big one. Not just mental toughness, emotional toughness, decisive and directional, aggressive and assertive, courageous. Displays of courage, like walking up to a woman without being, kind of scared and saying, "Hi, I'm Alex." There's courage to that, and women know there's courage to that. They know that you're facing rejection, and you'll immediately get kind of a pretty smile if you give them this sort of, it's not weird and creepy that I'm coming up to you right now. I feel totally cool about it because I've got the courage to do that. Aggressive, assertive, decisive, directional, courageous. The feminine, flowing, emotional. Emotional has a negative spin in the English language these days, and it's a shame because by emotional, I mean everything from tenderness to joy to, unfurling ecstasy. Like, emotional doesn't mean unstable. I think that's, it's like I said, the groups weaponize it in a weird way. By emotional, I mean tender and connected with other humans. All those things are the feminine. Fertile, aliveness, connected to nature, and rhythm. Music and dance are associated with the feminine. There's this sense that women, love to dance. There's an example of femininity quoted by a lot of people, which is, when a teenage girl dances in the mirror and is filled with joy for no reason but that she's dancing in the mirror all by herself, and men don't. Men sometimes shadow box in the mirror, pretending that we're, beating up the bad guy and saving the day, like the hero from our favorite action movie. And women dance not with like, I'm dancing with a handsome guy, not with dancing in a scenario, right? They just dance. They're just filled with the music. They're filled with the joy of the music and the movement of their body. That's the feminine. It doesn't have, like I said, it resists language even further because it doesn't have a context. It just is. And they dance with life that way. They dance with energy that way. And if that leaves you helpless and searching, I'm sorry. I'm really doing the best I can to define it this way. But I think I've got some more clear definitions that are going to help you further. But if this languaging, as stilted and messed up as it is, again, just kind of like taking stabs in the general direction of what is a very concrete feeling when you feel it. Like when you know it, when you feel it, you know it. You can feel the feminine, you can feel the masculine. There's no doubt about it. If you're a masculine man, you're just attracted to that feminine. If you're a feminine woman, you feel a masculine man. You know what I mean. But the words are hard. So I'm dancing around it a little bit. And if these words are helpful to you, if they help you to get a hold of what it is to be masculine and feminine, great. But don't be limited by these words at all. There's so much more to the masculine and feminine that I'm not likely to get to, and that I might even be ignorant of. So don't feel like it's this is an inclusive list. And if this doesn't speak to you, don't despair, because I got more. I got more. But if these are useful to you, great. Use them. If they're not, throw it out. Don't feel like you need to be stuck with this. Here's another definition of the masculine and feminine that I have used in some of my other programs, usually programs for men. And I think it's a good one. I don't know. I may have invented it. I don't think I read this anywhere, which is a subject-object difference. In sexuality, there's a subject-object difference between the masculine and the feminine. The masculine is the one that is attracted, and the feminine is that which is attracting, that which is attractive. And, for a masculine man, he feels his masculinity and his desire for the feminine. For a feminine woman, she feels her femininity, yes, as attracted to the masculine. But that's actually her masculine energy. That's her masculine energy going, I want that guy. I want that guy. That's actually her masculine energy, which is great. No problem. And he can be wanted, which is his feminine energy, which is great. No problem with that. That creates sexual polarity you're in. And couples can dance back and forth, but the man's going to be in the masculine more, the woman's going to be in the feminine more. It's only when they become neutral that sexual tension dies, sexual attraction dies. Really, you can switch back and forth constantly. And maybe I'll talk about more in a minute. But when you're in your feminine energy, it's the sheer delight of being the object of that desire, right? I was having a conversation with a girl once. It turns out she was a stripper, which is, a career which is probably a lot of women are not super comfortable taking advice from a stripper, and I apologize for that, but there's something that can be learned from the stripper because they deal with men and horny men more than any other woman on earth. And it's tough that they've come to that decision professionally in their lives, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe they just wanted the money and they're cool with it and they have no inhibitions. But whatever your moral stance is on it, let's put that aside for the moment. But she told me, and I've heard from other women since who had been involved in dancing to put themselves through school or whatever, that they loved being on stage. They loved it. They loved it. They hated doing the lap dances. They hated having to talk to these guys, just made them want to kill themselves. But they liked the dancing. They liked being up there and dancing naked and having a bunch of men look at them. They liked it. And a lot of women who've never been strippers have fantasies about exactly that because it's in us. It's in us. The man is the penetrator. The woman is penetrated. The man is the fucker. The woman is the fucky, if you will. Right? There's a subject-object relationship between the masculine and the feminine. And I just said this, but I'll repeat it. Bears repeating. Masculinity is attraction to feminine sexual energy. If you're a man and you want to know what it is to be masculine and you're confused by, integrity, strength, and toughness, because that's not you, but you still feel like that doesn't have to be where masculinity ends. But if you really want to know if you're masculine or not, the razor test of what masculine is It's attraction to feminine sexual energy. And if you're attracted to a really butch dominatrix, that's fine. It's cool because butch dominatrixes exist and they're going to be attracted to you because you have feminine energy, which is fine. I don't want to stigmatize one or the other. If you have feminine energy as a man, it's super cool. It doesn't make you gay. Might make you gay, might not make you gay, but the point is that there's no reason you can't do the sexual polarity thing with your feminine energy as a man who really identifies as a man and loves women, but loves masculine women. Masculinity, not being a man, not the same thing as masculine in this sense of polarity. Masculine polarity is attraction to feminine sexual energy. Femininity is attraction to the receptivity of masculine attraction. I made a grammatically horrific sentence because it's the most accurate way of doing it. Because femininity isn't just receptivity of masculine attraction, because that would imply that you're a slave to it, and you're not. You're attracted to it. It's an attractant. It's sexually pleasurable to receive masculine attraction. It's like it's yummy. You don't have to eat it though, right? It's not like if I don't receive him, then I'm not feminine. No, you can say fuck off. It's not a problem. So that's why I did this kind of grammatical mess. It's being attracted to receiving the receptivity of masculine attraction, and that's how you know if you have a feminine essence. If you are, now, and if that's not you, that's fine. You might be, a woman who just wants to throw a man down and make love to his beautiful, rippling, muscled body because you have a lot of masculine sexual energy. Totally cool. Not a problem. All right. There's a lot of brokenness to masculinity, sexual masculinity, that prevents men from being good at this sexual polarity thing and attracting women who are feminine. And it gets in the way. And then we're going to talk about the broken feminine, of course. But the broken masculine in our culture, and you may have a little bit of one or two of these things that are kind of holding you back, that if you cleaned it up would really resolve a lot of shit for you and make your relationships with women fantastic. You might have all of them and you might have bad. And it is possible that you've got some of these issues, and when you just see this, you'll be like, that's it, I got it. And you'll have this moment of insight, and you'll have this really very sudden global shift in the way that you relate with women, your success in relating with women, which is my goal, and I would love that. So pay attention, because just noticing a problem sometimes is enough for you to go, I don't need to do that anymore. I don't fucking need to do that anymore. I'm done with that. But also, you might feel something that's like, oh, fuck, that's sticky, and I don't know how to get rid of it. You might need therapy. And this is not a therapy session, and I'm not a therapist. But therapy's good, okay? Therapy's good. It's a privilege to be able to analyze your own mind. It's a privilege of people who have the time and the money to do it and the intellect to do it. So I'm a believer. Anyway, here's the list. Sexual shame, which is pretty common, right? Which is being uncomfortable with masculinity and sexuality. Your discomfort isn't with women. Your discomfort is with you. Your discomfort is with your penis, not with her vagina, right? You love her vagina, but your penis is weird. It's yucky, and you got a lot of shame around the fact that you feel like, well, if she knew that I was sexually attracted to her, she'd be grossed out because I'm grossed out, right? That's what sexual shame is, right? It may be religious. It could be because you were actually shamed. One of your parents might have said, oh, don't touch that, you'll go blind, or don't touch that because it's yucky, and whatever. These things get in there, right? We all have some. Not all of us. Most of us have some. So, just having a little bit of sexual shame isn't the end of the world. But if sexual shame dominates you because of your discomfort with the masculinity and with sexuality, you got to deal with that, right? You got to deal with that. And we'll talk more about that in this program. I've talked a lot about it in some of my other programs that are, directed to men, and you might want to talk about it with a professional. Neediness and approval seeking is managing your masculine insecurity. This is like, you just don't know if you're a man. You don't necessarily feel man enough. And so what happens is you need her to validate that you're a man, and that's what comes out as neediness and approval seeking. We're going to do a whole thing on neediness next week, so we're going to dig pretty deeply into this one. But neediness and approval seeking is like, do you like me? Do you like me? Who would I have to be for you to like me? Pay attention to me. Please look at me. If you don't look at me, I'm going to be sad. I'm going to feel like a pussy. So please look at me and, validate me as a man. And I need to have sex with you, because if you don't have sex with me, then, I'm probably not man enough. And then I'm going to really feel bad about myself. That's neediness and approval seeking, right? And that's your attempt to manage your masculine insecurity. Self-disapproving is distrust of the masculine. You don't trust in this idea that you could be the aggressor. You don't trust in the idea that you could stand firm even when a woman is, being what seems to be irrational, but is actually emotional. She's communicating something relevant and important, right? So your distrust of your masculinity and your feelings of sexual desire is highly related to sexual shame, right? You don't trust yourself. Afraid. You've been hurt by the masculine, right? Something in your life, maybe your dad, maybe a bully, maybe you were sexually abused as a child, or you were hurt by somebody who had a bunch of masculine energy, and so you don't want to be that way, right? Machismo, yeah, they're all bitches and whatever. I'm so cool. Come on, baby, and like we know macho, right? And sort of like if you express an emotion or you cry, then you would be a loser. You'd be a wuss. Expressing emotion, crying, has nothing to do with how masculine you are. That has to do with having access to your feminine, which is entirely positive. Machismo is a misunderstanding, a complete misunderstanding of what stoicism is. This idea of toughness and stone-faced emotionlessness. That's not what stoicism is. The ability to do that when you must, right? In the face of challenge. It's not yeah, this is the way I am all the time. You don't like it? It's because you're weak and I'm strong. That's so fear-based, and it's disillusioned and resentful of the feminine. Possibly from your mom, right? Which would require some therapy, but possibly because women didn't like you when you were younger, or a particular woman didn't like you when you were younger, and you didn't get over it, and you were disillusioned, and it didn't work out the way it worked out for Luke Skywalker, and so you went macho. And that's not an answer, and it doesn't work, right? And angry. There's no shortage of angry men right now. No shortage of angry men. They shoot up schools and stuff, right? They were hurt by the feminine. I think we all understand what I'm talking about there, right? Yeah, their heart's broken. And it's, these hurt men who walk around and, they form the red pill groups and the MGTOW groups and all these groups. They are hurt and brokenhearted, and they don't get the piece. It's so obvious that it's hard for me to believe that they can't see this. It's like women have never had their hearts broken by men in their world. Like they just don't get that this is absolutely a co-equal part of being a human, that sometimes we get our hearts broken. Both men and women. It's natural. It's normal. It's part of the process of becoming an adult. All right, moving on to the broken feminine. It's going to look familiar, needless to say. There's a lot of reciprocal things in here. And actually, take a quick peek. Okay, good. I don't see any weird comments, so I think that means we're still online and everything is still working. Good. All right. The broken feminine. Sexual shame. Where sexual shame for men was discomfort with masculinity and sexual desire, sexual shame for women is also it's not uncomfortable with femininity, it's uncomfortable with masculinity and sexual desire. In other words, it's being uncomfortable with your own sexual desires, which are your masculine, right? This idea of, what you want and you want to go get, right? And sexual shame it's huge for both genders, right? It's huge from religion, from upbringing, from parents, from mean school children. When if you got your breasts early, if you got them late, it's just such a fucking mess. Numb and dissociated. Men usually don't do this. This is more of a women thing. You were hurt by the masculine, and so you're numb around your sexuality. It's dissociated. You don't go there. This in the most extreme cases from child sexual abuse. Going to want to see a therapist for that, probably. Great book called Partners in Healing, I recommend. I talk about sexual abuse in quite a few of my programs and some ideas that I have around recovering from it, but I'm not an expert. I have my own theories and opinions that have worked for some couples. But you can also there's a lot of ways that women can be sexually hurt by the masculine and become numb and dissociated as a consequence. I don't think I need to itemize them. Woman who plays the masculine role. It could be, again, if she may have a masculine nature, and that's not what I'm talking about. A woman with a masculine nature is simply that, and she can have a wonderful relationship with a feminine woman or a feminine man. Typically, women with a masculine nature are bisexual. Not 100% of the time, then gender is, like I said, it's quite a rainbow, so there are so many permutations, variations. But what I mean is a woman who organically, naturally has a feminine nature, but constantly finds herself playing the masculine role because she has distrust of the masculine, because she had a weak dad, or because she was married to a guy, might still be married to a man who can't handle his own masculine shit. She dated men when she was younger who were very feminine and couldn't. She just was forced into this role of making the decisions, of being the sexual aggressor, and he wasn't trustable, so she had to create the stability and trust in her life. So she doesn't trust the masculine, so she's been kind of forced into playing this masculine role. And this is one of those things that I don't think you need therapy for. I think you can just drop this. I think you can fucking drop it. And I really think you just breathe into this whole feminine thing and just try it out, feel ridiculous doing it, and then discover, holy shit, I love this. I love my feminine essence. It's right there for you. Sexually repressed, you have sexual desire, you pretend you don't, you push it down. It's as if you don't have it because you're managing the broken masculine, which is all that stuff I talked about on the previous slide. The broken masculine in our society, men who are ashamed, men who act macho, all of this shit you've had to manage. You had to manage to the point where you just sexually repress. Angry. They're angry men shoot shit. Angry women do not shoot people usually, so they're better. They're less bad. They're less bad. But a lot of women are very angry with men, and they're angry with men for shooting stuff. Shooting up schools is something that a lot of women are angry about. A lot of men are angry about it too. They're angry that men act macho. They're angry at all the bullshit. They're angry at that guy who rejected them and their ex-husband who was a fuckhead, right? They're just angry. They're disillusioned and resentful of the masculine, just like angry men who are disillusioned, resentful of that ex-wife that divorced them, took all their money, and then tried to take their children away, right? There's a lot of reasons for us to be angry with each other. And it breaks this possibility of joy in your life. So these are things that if you can identify them in your life, again, you can see it and you're like, I got that. That's me. You might take a chance at just dropping it on the floor and leaving it behind when you walk into the next room and into the rest of your life without it. You really could change in a moment. And if you can't and you need more help, there's a lot of books to read. There's a lot of other resources, right? So let's talk a little bit about how to do sexual polarity. Now, everything we've talked about so far is, to some degree, how to do it, right? If you know what it is, you can do more of it, right? Perhaps going through those previous things that we talked about, like the qualities of the masculine, being the subject of and the being attracted to feminine energy, perhaps all the words and discussion that we used about what the feminine is are clear for a woman who's like, oh yeah, man, I forgot how much I loved dancing in the mirror as a teenager, and I get that energy that I felt in my body, and I can do that. I can do that. Um, these are all things you could do, right? But I want you to be careful. I want you to be careful about doing qualities of the masculine or qualities of the feminine, like strength or receptivity or whatever it is, by doing them in order to get somebody attracted to you because you're like doing the thing, because that's not going to work. I want you to be careful of it because um, faking it is not going to work. Putting on an act of masculine or act of feminine, well, you know, it might superficially work. I don't want to say, I don't want to give you a blanket, it won't work. It might superficially work, but it's not going to work long term. It's not going to be something that actually builds real intimacy with a real human. Like it might get them as far as a phone number or into bed, or it might get you one night of sex, but it's very unlikely to work long term if it's not something that's organic to you. And then, so like if you one of these words was like, oh, I love that part of myself, and I've been ashamed of it, and I've been hiding it, right? Like if you can identify that, then that's how you do sexual polarity. Drop that piece and do that. Okay, but here's how to do it. If those words don't connect with you, and also you could, but my point being is you've got to feel this stuff. You can't just do it. And I know that's not the best how-to you've ever heard in your life, but trust me and go with me. Okay. The main way that you do sexual polarity is to stop doing hiding sexual polarity. We do hiding sexual polarity. Here's like the thing is, if you have a masculine essence or if you have a feminine essence, this is not a matter of what you do. This is a matter of stop doing this thing that's preventing you from doing it. Stop doing holding it back. Stop doing hiding it. That is the number one way to do sexual polarity. It is fucking in you. It's in you. And it's easy and effortless when you're doing it right. When you're not doing it right, you'll know because it seems like, oh, I'm trying to make attraction happen here and it's not happening automatically. Then you're faking it. You're doing it wrong. Okay. You do it right by stopping doing what you're doing. Okay. How do you do that? Right? You've got to relax and trust that feeling in your body that is masculine or feminine. And you can relax and trust it because, and this is important, could really be the thing that gives you access to doing it. Sexual polarity isn't sex. And I think a lot of people screw that up. They feel like, that if I do sexual polarity, that's like having sex, and it's not. Sex is like, you can have a baby from sex. You can get a horrible disease from having sex. You can be judged for having sex. You can, there's a lot of consequences to having sex. If you're a woman, having sex means, going someplace alone in private with a man, which could be dangerous because you don't know him that well, or you do know him and whatever. But the point is that sex is sex, and there's a lot of consequences to sex. It's an act, and you've got a lot of choice around whether or not you're going to do this sex thing. There's no choice around sexual polarity. It's not like, it's in you. It's a biological flow that is happening all the time, right? You might be repressing it. You might be ashamed of it, but it's in there. So recognize that it's not sex, that it's really not a big deal. And then that might be the very thing that gives you permission to, so if you're a man, you see a beautiful woman and you walk over to her, or it's your wife and you know that she probably doesn't want to have sex tonight and you're trying to work through that in your marriage, right? Whatever that is. There's this sense that, well, if I walk up to her and be masculine and create this polarity thing, and she doesn't want to have sex with me, then that would be totally unwelcome and fucked up. And no, it wouldn't, because it's not sex. You're not having sex with her against her will. Sexual polarity is it's natural, it's normal, and it's fun, and it does not involve sex. It might involve sex later, right? But it doesn't imply that sex is going to happen. And if you get that, if you get the difference, Data's got a great metaphor for this. His metaphor is, imagine that you're driving the babysitter home, and she's underage, but she's a girl, and you feel it. You feel this attraction for her. That's sexual polarity, that you feel it. Now, if you act on it, you're a jerk, right? You're a horrible person. And that's not masculine because it's a lack of integrity and it's fucking with your family. And there's all these, like a masculine man would not even think about touching her. And he'd maintain a formality with her so as not to make her uncomfortable. And you can maintain this formality with her and you cannot make a move on her and you can be totally comfortable while absolutely feeling and enjoying this thing we call sexual polarity. And she'll be giggling and enjoying your masculinity, not because she wants to fuck you, because you're the weird old man dad. She doesn't want to fuck you, but that doesn't mean that she's not going to enjoy that real sense that you're a man and that she's a girl, a woman, right? A little edgy example there, but it's a good one. You have to understand sexual polarity isn't sex. There's no threat to it. So that may give you some permission as a man or a woman to play with sexual polarity without feeling like, oh, that means I'm going to have to fuck. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. They're separate. Open into your body's pleasure. Open. That's a bit metaphorical. Breathe into your body. Open to your body. Feel into your body's pleasure. Your body's pleasure, as a man or as a woman, is your sexual polarity, right? When you're specifically, right? This isn't pleasure from delicious food, though it could be. Could be. It's certainly close, right? When you're talking to an attractive woman, you're talking to an attractive man. If you can open to what your body is feeling in this flirt, in this conversation, then you're doing sexual polarity. It's dropping the shit that's in the way of being in your body. So if you're a man and you're thinking, what do I need to say next so that she'll laugh or like me? How do I need to demonstrate her that I'm the kind of guy she should want to be with? Then you are not doing sexual polarity. You're doing this weird little mental dance, right? If you're a woman and your husband hasn't made love to you in a long time and you're trying to figure out how to, get that to happen while you guys are having this really nice conversation and laughing together, you're not doing sexual polarity. You're doing this intellectual game, right? But if you're in your body and you're feeling his madness in this moment, now he's going to feel that, and it's going to evoke from him his masculinity. And that's a very interesting thing about sexual polarity, which is that there is this thing called emotional state resonance. That's what I call it. I'm not the guy that invented it. A lot of people talk about this, but humans, we are sensitive to other people's emotions, whether through energy, pheromones, or aura, or I don't know, like we don't, micro facial expressions is a thing, mirror neurons is a thing, but you don't need to know why or how. I don't know why or how. Science doesn't totally know why or how yet, but we know that it's true. We know that we're sensitive to somebody's in a shitty mood. We know that we're sensitive to somebody's in a horny mood. We're sensitive to somebody being attracted to us. We're sensitive to somebody being not attracted to us. We're sensitive to somebody wanting to do us harm. Super sensitive to that. Super sensitive to somebody wanting to do us harm. Somebody looks at you and wants to do you harm, man, you feel it goes right fucking through your body. So this is emotional state resonance. We feel it. And typically, we'll either dance with it and kind of feel the same thing back with them, like two tuning forks playing the same pitch, or we'll give it the opposite spin. So if somebody wants to hurt you, rather than feel like, no, I'm going to fucking hurt them, you might feel fear, I got to run away. They're aggressive, you're going to feel like, I got to get out of here. Very normal response. No, a lot of men will feel like, come on, buddy, bring it, smack you up, like so. So you might feel the same thing, you might feel something different, but you feel it and you have a corresponding reaction to it. So if you open, breathe, feel into your body's pleasure, sexual pleasure, in the moment with another human that you've been married to for years or you just met at a cocktail party or Starbucks, they're going to feel that. They're not going to not feel that. And good news, it's not sex. So you can relax and you can trust this. And when I say you can trust this, I mean, trust me that you can trust this, because maybe you don't trust it. And I'm just telling you, you're not going to go to jail for this, for sure, right? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Trust me and trust this. And then see what happens. And I think what you'll discover is nothing bad happens and maybe something good, but this takes some practice. So when I say nothing bad will happen, maybe something good, I mean something good will happen if you keep at it. This is practicable. It's not something that you have to get as an insight. It's practicable. Okay, so emotional state resonance happens. They can feel this thing of you being in your body. And if you are somebody with a masculine essence at your core, that you are delighted by sexual femininity, feminine energy, then automatically you're going to do the right things. You don't have to worry about all those adjectives about what masculine is. You don't have to worry about that. It's going to be automatic. A feminine woman makes a man trustable, makes him a man who wants to be trustable. Even if he's been a big fucking liar and a flake his whole life. He hasn't been honest with his boss. He hasn't been honest with his parents. He hasn't been honest with his friends. Now he's with this very feminine woman and he feels it in his body and he delights in it. He lives in it. It brings forth his like, I would defend her. I would never let her down. It just brings it out. It's automatic. You'll feel it automatically. Likewise, if you're a woman, right? If you feel into this enjoyment of his sexual attention, if you feel into this, like, I don't need to make something happen here. I can just sit and enjoy the way he's looking at me and these possibilities and the beauty of this day and the feeling of sunshine on my face or the breeze in my hair, this embodied feelingness of pleasure and getting into that state where you would just dance in the mirror without context, without reason, because emotion is without context, without reason. The feminine is without context, without reason, which doesn't mean that women can't be reasonable, right? So many women will reject these ideas because they feel like, well, then, that's in the same way the men might reject it because they don't want to be some like hostile brute. It's not at all what this is about. This is about sex. And sex is natural and normal, and desire is natural and normal and beautiful. And it's an important part of enjoying your life as a human. So this emotional resonance then happens. And if you're being masculine and you're feeling this thing, you don't have to have sex. All you have to do is enjoy the fact that her feminine energy is delicious and pleasurable to you. Just be in that, and she will feel that, and she's going to resonate with that. And she's going to resonate with it in one of two ways. It's either going to be delightful to her, and she's going to be increasingly feminine, and she's going to start feeling the music that's playing in the background at Starbucks, and she's going to play with her hair a little bit because it feels good. Her hair is soft, right? And it happens automatically. It just begins to happen. Or she's going to be distrustful and maybe put it off a little bit. And that's okay. It means don't try and fuck her because she will reject you and it's going to be weird and awkward. Don't do it. But you don't need to stop enjoying what you're feeling in your body. You don't have to be weird and like, you don't have to be a creeper. You can just keep doing what you're doing, but just feel your body. You can enjoy it right down to your toes. She can't take that away from you. She doesn't want to take that away from you. It's fun to be sexually desired. It is. It's a compliment, as long as you're not being weird about it. You don't need to be weird about it. And you'll feel this interplay, whether you're a man or a woman, you'll feel this interplay, and you can then play with that flow. There's a flow that happens in between. If you let yourself open, breathe, and feel into your body's pleasure, and you can notice that emotional resonance happening, you can actually play in that space. And then you're a Jedi. Then you're a Jedi. But it takes some practice and it takes something else, which is most of us who haven't practiced this, most of us haven't, okay? It's very weird and awkward at first to sustain sexual energy in your body because we're afraid it means fucking, but it doesn't mean fucking. It's just the flow of sexual polarity, right? So what you want to do is over time, expand your ability to sustain sexual energy and pleasure in your body. And I want you to playfully challenge yourself to get good at this, okay? Because when you feel sexual energy in your body, typically we have ways of getting rid of it. And listen, me too, right? I am by no means the ultimate Jedi master of this, but I'm conscious of it, and it makes a big difference in my life because I'm conscious of it. So, for example, maybe it's just past breakfast, and I kiss my wife, and I can feel that there's something there, and then we have this kind of slow We can feel each other's breaths, our faces are close together, and there's sexual energy happening between us. And then I'll crack a joke like Zorro the gay blade or something. I'll make some kind of a, because I love Zorro the gay blade. He's my favorite, you know? And so I'll make some little joke. And that joke is me dumping sexual energy. I'm dumping it because it's uncomfortable and weird, and we're not going to have sex right now because we've got a day to do, right? So we have all these ways of dumping sexual energy. We can laugh, we can make a joke, we can, put somebody off. Like a lot of times a woman will, her first reaction is a little bit like, hey, I'm busy, dude, because it's a lot to hold it in your body. It's a lot. We'll giggle, we'll do something uncomfortable, right? So holding this energy in your body is what magnifies sexual polarity and attraction and creates this space of, what we think of as like teasing, right? It happens in your ability to maintain it and not, for a man, typically, he'll either make a joke or he'll start to act macho. He'll like try and manage it by being cool. He'll try and manage it by, figuring out some agenda, or it'll like, put him into his logical brain, which he probably wouldn't want me anyway, or it'll put him into his anger with women and fuck them and they reject me. And like any of those things are really ways of like dumping sexual energy because it's just too much for you to manage in your body. But to just hold it and enjoy it and play with it, that is the sexual communication of sexual polarity. I want to give you another important piece, and I know we're running a little bit long here, but this is kind of an important piece, which is that, as I mentioned, if you are doing this sexual polarity thing, you're feeling your masculine, you're feeling your feminine, and it's rejected for some reason, that's somewhat painful. And frequently, it happens because of some internal belief system or the broken masculine or the broken feminine that's happening. But it's also because you're not controlling the context that the communication is happening in with the sexual polarity, and you're not managing it in any way. So what you want to learn how to do is not just communicate with sexual polarity, but communicate with sexual polarity in an attractive way. Because it's really easy, right, for a man to feel sexual attraction for a woman. Now that sexual polarity is automatically happening as soon as he feels that attraction. It's in the air. It's not a choice. It's happening. It's on, okay? And she may be delighted by it. That's attractively communicating with sexual polarity. But she also might be creeped out. She might be like, oh, this is weird and inappropriate. I don't like this. Like the babysitter example, right? She might be creeped out. But why isn't she creeped out when David Data does it? I assume she's not, or he wouldn't have used the example. I'm assuming the example really happened. That's what I'm assuming, okay? And I think it's a safe assumption. So why wasn't she creeped out? Why was it okay? And the answer is because he was very solid in his context that this was okay. He was very solid in that frame, in that context. So the question is, who gets to write the story about your sexuality? Is your sexuality creepy and unwelcome? Or is it totally fine and natural and cool and beautiful and fun? And I'm not going to fuck you, so it doesn't matter. Or I might fuck you, and that would be fun, and you would enjoy that. Or it's creepy and weird, and oh God, this guy thinks that he's ugh, how unwelcome. If you're a woman, who gets to write the story about your sexuality, right? Oh, she's slutty, she wants it, or she's like needy and clingy, or no, like it's beautiful and fun, and I'm in love with the universe, and it's beautiful and delicious, and any man would be lucky to be with this singing, soaring creature of feminine energy that is me, this radiance that is me, right? Which is it? I mean, your feminine radiance is absolutely that second thing. But why might the story go off the rails? And the answer usually is you. It's usually you projecting your insecurity or weirdness into the space, usually. Sometimes it's them, but who gets to write your story about your sexuality? Well, if you let them write it, they will write it for you. They will. They will write it for you if you let them. And I recommend that you don't. I recommend that you write your story about your sexuality yourself. and that you make up your own mind about what that context is. And they can't take that away from you. So that a woman can go, yeah, he's a creep. And you can be like, wow, she's really ignorant and naive. That's a shame for her. I wonder what man must have hurt her that she would feel that way. And then you can go and enjoy your life, right? Or same thing for a woman, if some guy's like, oh, she's weird and emotional, and it's like, and then he can go off with his men going their own way and his red pill brothers, and they can, masturbate with sex dolls and whatever. They're missing out. They're the ones missing out. Truly, if you are the one writing your story about your sexuality, then there's nothing about sexual polarity that is not joyful and delightful. And if you get that, then you can do this. Okay? I'm going to take it a step further. There's a book called Sapiens. It's a must read. It's maybe the best book I've read in the last 10 years. And I read a ridiculous number of books for really understanding what it is to be human. Okay? Written by a guy named Yuval Noah Harari. I recommend it. In Sapiens, he makes a point that it's a hugely popular book, and it's academically highly discussed right now because his theories are fantastic, and they really reveal a lot about the rise and fall of civilizations, why it happened, and how humans became human. And his big point, the major point, is that while animals are loaded up with all these instincts that tell them to do what to do, and we've got them too, for the most part, what tells humans what we ought to do is the stories that we tell, that we all are aware of and tell, right? And in this case, whether that's romantic movies or what you learned in Bible school, this whole area of sexuality is surrounded by stories. And he makes the point, it's a good point, that the reason that one tribe beat another tribe typically, and then ultimately became a huge, powerful city, was because of the story that united them. And other animals don't unite on stories. They unite only by family and clan. And family and clan is maybe going to get you to 100 people. But what happens when you have to manage 10,000 people or 100,000 people? Rome was a city of 1 million, right? So city of 1 million in an empire of many millions. Like, how did that? They're not family and clan. What's the organizing principle? And the organizing principle is we're Romans. We're Romans. That's it. We're Romans, and Romans are like this, and we're like this, and we're like the other thing. We've got this story about how the city first came to be, and we've got this political system, which is just a story. And Harari points out the stock market is just a story. Like, these stock certificates are worth money, and money is what? And stock is what? Parts of a company, which is what? Those are all stories. Now, is a company that sells stuff and employs people, is that a real thing? Well, it's a story, and we all believe it. And if you believe it and I believe it, then it's real. So story is insanely relevant and a core principle of what it is to be a human. Other successful stories are things like, I'm a Christian and you're a Muslim. You're a Jew and I'm a Buddhist, or whatever, and those are stories that orient huge numbers of people as a group. And we have a common thing because we've got the same story going. So when I talk about this idea of who gets to write the story about your sexuality, I mean, is it society? Is it that school teacher that sexually abused you? Is it the person you're talking to? Is it your mommy? Is it Jesus? Is it anybody but you? Because the story about your sexuality is yours, if you want it to be. Otherwise, somebody will very, very gladly give you your story. And what I'm saying is, in this moment, with this other person, when you're doing sexual polarity, one of the real keys to doing it successfully and attractively is managing that story, managing the story that's being told. Choosing the narrative of your sexuality creates the context in which you are talking to this other person, interacting with. Again, could be your husband, could be your wife, could be a girl you just met, girl you're on a date with, girl you're on the third date with, girl you're having sex with right now, right? This is all happening within the context of sexual polarity. So what's the narrative that's happening? And just to give you an example, if the narrative is everybody's looking, I'm making a fool of myself right now, then that's going to be creepy. And sexual polarity is absolutely happening, right? You're feeling your desire, and that's why you're afraid people are looking at you, and that's why you think you're humiliating yourself. Sexual polarity is happening, but you're coming across as creepy, right? People are looking. They think I'm a slut, right? Is that the story? But I'm saying if you control the narrative and you're like, people are looking, of course. Don't they wish they were me? Look, they're looking at us because we've got this something magical happening right here, right now. And it's beautiful. So you create that context, you create that story. You don't have to. I recommend you do. And if you do, then it sets a frame. And if you really believe your story, and there's no reason not to because they are absolutely random and arbitrary, there is no reality to that story, but there's not a real one and a one that you're imagining. It would be a huge mistake to think people are looking at you and that's weird, but you're going to pretend that it's okay because that's not happening. Okay, this is totally in your imagination either way, 100% your imagination. So if you choose the narrative and you choose it wisely, then then the person you're talking to is going to feel that. And if you really believe it, then anything they say or do isn't going to change that, right? And that's called controlling the frame, and that is going to make the interaction go well. But I'll tell you, there's really no reason not to speak your narrative out loud. I mean, after all, if you're talking to somebody, you need something to talk about. And I don't think that you need to always do this. I don't even think you need to do this most of the time, but it's a great exercise. It's a great exercise for helping you to understand how to use this tool of context and story to control the narrative of sexual polarities, to actually speak the narrative, to actually say, oh, wow, everybody's looking at us. Do they think something's going on here? Is something going on here? Maybe there is. You know, everybody's looking at me because I'm talking to the prettiest girl here, and they didn't have the balls to do it. What do you think of that? Right? You're speaking the narrative while so that the context is not I'm being creepy. The context isn't you're being a slut. The context is I'm saying out loud what the context is. It's very hard to deny that that's happening. It's hard to deny that it's happening because I'm telling the story, and you can look around and be like, oh yeah, that's the story, right? So you don't have to do this every. It's not like if you don't do this, you're doing it wrong, or that this is some technique. It's neither of those things. It's something to help you to get good with your good story, right? That's what this is really for you. You do this a few times, you don't have to keep doing it, though you might do it because it's fun. It's fun, it's flirty, and it's relevant. You're actually speaking about the situation that's unfolding right before your very eyes. And remember, there's a lot going on in the world. It's not just, people are looking at me or it's whatever. It's the context could just be well, anything, right? Anything. It's after dinner, and you're feeling a little bit like you want something to happen. You can speak the context of what's going on. Wow, looks like we have a little extra time. The kids are in bed already. Isn't this an interesting turn of events? So there's this way to kind of frame it by telling the story. And then the other person hears that story and it's in there, right? It's in there. You didn't have to just pretend. Okay, let me get back to talking to you live. Okay, here we are. I have been going for more than an hour and a half already. I apologize for that. Apparently I tried to cover too much. But I would like to take a couple of questions if I can. So I'm going to take a look at the little chat box here, and I'm going to scroll down and see how many. Ooh, whoa, there's a whole conversation going on here. All right. Tiffany, rarely feel sizzle, doesn't stop me, but would like to know how to create it and make things much better. I hope I answered that question with this entire thing. You can be kind and strong. Many traits aren't gendered unless culturally conditioned to be. Absolutely true. But again, one of the things that I really want to impress upon you, and maybe you already get this, but I'm not talking about gender, right? A woman can be strong and absolutely feminine. It's not a matter of gender. I'm not talking about gender. Okay, that would be a huge misunderstanding to think that I'm talking about gender. Um, a woman can be a soldier. A woman can be a fireman if she can pass the test, toss a body over her shoulder, crawl down a ladder. She's my fireman. Okay, my firewoman. Totally good with that. Not a problem. A woman can be aggressive. Ronda Rousey can kick my ass, and I'm cool with that. Okay. Not only is she physically stronger than me and physically more aggressive than I have ever been in my whole life. I've watched her fight. She's more aggressive than I have ever been in my whole life. And by the way, I've done martial arts for many years, and I teach martial arts, and I'm a good teacher. But I've never been a good fighter, never been good in the ring because I'm not that aggressive. I'm just not. Just you know. So she's more aggressive than me. She's stronger than me, and she's mentally tougher than me. Okay, so this is not about gender, but sexually, right? Sexually, in terms of sexual polarity. In that space, my ability to display strength of character, sexual aggressiveness, as in I'm the one leading, right? I'm the seducer, not the seducee. I'm the fucker, not the fuckee, right? It's not about gender. That's the whole thing that Margaret Fuller figured out in 1845, that these are separate parts of our identity and that our identity holds both. Holds both. I love poetry. I love dancing. I love savoring fine foods. I am super, insanely loving and silly with my little daughter. I am so nurturing. It makes me wish that I had boobs so that I could breastfeed. I am incredibly in touch with my feminine. No worries about it. I don't think it makes me less of a man in any way. So it's not about gender. Ancient Greeks cried when they went to war. Yeah, all that, absolutely. Ishmael, it seems that there is something that is beyond the concept of sexual polarity to explain free-flowing sexual passion. There is something more to it. Ishmael, okay, let's go. Do you think these associations are just cultural constructs, or is there some truth to them that comes from a different place than, say, culture? Yeah, so the cultural thing is the gender stuff. The cultural thing is the shame stuff. The cultural stuff gets in the way. The stuff that I'm trying to communicate to you is biology. That's where it comes from. It comes from biology. So it's transcultural. Now, again, if I really want to be as intellectually honest about this as I can, it's impossible to parse as humans because of what I was saying about the book *Sapiens* that Harari writes about. There's this thing that we are, so much of who we are in our identity is these stories, that what it is to be a human is to live with these stories. Like you believe that the company that you work for is real, and it isn't. It's a fucking story that everybody agrees is real. Like banks aren't real. They're a story. They're a story, right? And that makes it real. Makes it real enough, right? It's functionally real. But for the most part, what I'm talking about is something that's biology. Sexual polarity has something to do with biology. Yeah, man, I felt experience. You're cutting out a bit at the moment. Sorry, Tiffany. This is all recorded. Big difference between toxic and healthy masculinity. Yeah, I hope I covered some of that. Wonder why toxic femininity is much talked about, and I wonder what actually it is. So, all right, let me try and be like super specific about this. Toxic femininity is incredibly talked about all over the internet in something called the manosphere that you're not invited to. And these guys, you would think of them as toxic masculine, okay? And they think that women are toxic feminine. And they're the edges, they're the fringes. Toxic masculinity is objectively more dangerous because guns, and men are more aggressive. Except Ronda Rousey's out there, and I like that she can kick the shit out of like bad dudes, but for the most part, men are more aggressive, we're physically stronger, and we're more likely to pick up a gun and kill a bunch of people. It sucks, right? We don't like that. Nobody likes that. But most men and most women are not at these weird edges. Most women are not man haters. Most men are not woman haters. But we get caught up in the rhetoric of the edges, and the edges are toxic. The edges are toxic. And it's a chicken or egg thing, right? I mean, toxic femininity is somewhat a cause for toxic masculinity and vice versa. I don't care whose fault it was at the beginning. I don't care if it was like, well, it started because she was a bitch and she tried to take my children away and took all my money in the divorce. And then all the court sided with her because she's a woman. And so I'm going to kill everybody. Okay. So I don't care if she started it or he started. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It's toxic, right? Sexual polarities in sex. Yep. Some would consider that as emotional cheating. I don't think they would because there's no intention there, Ishmael. It's not emotional cheating because there's no intention at all. It's just the fact of biology. It's not possible, right? I mean, if I'm sitting with my wife and we're watching a movie and um, what's his name? The guy that plays Don Draper. I don't even remember the actor's name, but he shows up on the screen. I know she's sexually attracted to him. Is that an emotional infidelity? No, it's biology. The man is beautiful and masculine, has a deep voice, and he stands straight. He's hot. Okay. Same thing, hot girl. My wife knows that I notice hot women because how could I not? But I don't need to make a big deal out of it. I have no intentions around it. There's no cheating there. No emotional cheating, no any kind of cheating. Ishmael, why would that be emotional cheating? It's just energy. It doesn't have to go anywhere exactly. And it's in there, okay, let's go on. I think emotional affairs are dangerous. Yes, absolutely. They can be avoided and dismantled by controlling your thoughts. You don't need to control your thoughts. You just don't need to act on them. Your thoughts are nothing. Your thoughts are nothing. They're literally nothing. They come from nowhere. Your thoughts, like, are your self-critical voice is your thoughts. Is your self-critical voice something you need to listen to? It sure as shit isn't. And we think all kinds, like, your dreams are your thoughts. Your dreams are your thoughts. And so I've had dreams where I, like, did terrible things or terrible things were done to me. And your dreams can be cruel. You can have nightmares. Those are thoughts. Thoughts are nothing. Okay. It's what you do that matters. It's what you intend to do that matters as well. Right. Da, 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 da. Okay. All right. Any more questions? I got to the end of these little messages here. And I'll tell you what, if you've got more questions, because we really have run very far over and I want to respect your time and mine, if you have more questions, email them to me and I will do an additional session where I answer them unless they make sense in the next webinar. But since Robert just typed, any thoughts on using sexual polarity when you're not in person over the text phone, maintaining attraction when you're not in the same place? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sexual polarity is necessarily less intense with greater and greater removal. So even being further apart in a room, seeing somebody from across the room is going to have less than when you're closer, and which is much less than when you're physical touch. Like zing, you can feel like, oh my God, girl's skin doesn't feel like boy's skin. Like his breath, the smell of his sweat is like, something man is going on here for a woman, right? So the closer you are, the more intense all that biology is. But it also can all just happen up in your imagination. So that's why phone sex works, right? But I recommend, if you're in a long distance relationship, this is specifically germane to you, I recommend Skype or Google Chat or something where you can see each other. There's so much to those microfacial expressions and mirror neurons that get roped into that and that make it more better. Tiffany, yes, there is definitely a delay for everybody. So yes, 10 minutes though is more. A question I'd like to ask at the end though, so don't hang up. Well, you should be asking them now. And if I don't get them before we hang up, like I said, I'm going to do a future session or I'll just create an additional video and answer all those questions. Can you speak about the relationship between sexual polarity attraction and libido, specifically when good polarity attraction struggles to lead to increased libido with two people who are years into marriage? So, sexual polarity is rooted in biology and in something that's energetic within that biology. And when you've been together for years, the problem typically, now, if you're together enough years, it means that you're older. And if you're old enough, there's a lot of hormones and stuff that kick offline and they're going to reduce libido. And sexual polarity is something that will absolutely increase and magnify sexual and emotional and loving desire for sure. And it will even magnify libido, but to an extent, right? There's still something to this whole animal thing that we can't quite escape up until the day we die and our soul flutters free, right? So there's a component of this that is age related. However, cultivating your sexual polarity, cultivating it, and making it the real context and priority of the relationship will increase and maintain libido in a totally, totally different way. And again, story and context helps with this. I'll give you an example of story and context for married couples. My wife and I mentioned my 2-year-old, we had a baby, and zero sleep, and sexual desire tanks. Your libido's gone, just no sleep, just blurry, fucking crazy with the baby. Also, her estrogen levels plummet because she's breastfeeding, and my testosterone levels plummet because it turns out nurturing babies and spending time with babies reduces men's testosterone, and there's a lot of good biological reasons for that because you don't want to, go off into a crazy rage and kill the baby. So a lot of stuff is going on that's going to harm our sex life and our libido. But our polarity, our masculine-feminine interplay, is something that is important to us and that is not accidental, right? It's priority. And because it's priority, because we play in that space intentionally, the story that we get to write around it is different. So there are a lot of people who write the story. It's just a story. Well, we've had babies now. That's the end of our sex life, and that's that. Now from here on, it's downhill because we're never going to be wild and young anymore. We're parents now, and parents can't behave that way. Those are stories, right? There's a story that mommies shouldn't be, bad little slutty girls or whatever fun you like to play, right? That's a story. It's a good story, but not, it's a persuasive story, I should say, but it's not a good story. It's not a fun story. But I can remember saying to my wife, and I didn't do this as a trick or an intention. It was my real story. It was the truth of my story. But as I'm sitting here teaching this class and talking to you, it occurs to me that it's also a very functional story, which I can remember when we hadn't had sex in weeks, maybe months, I don't know. And we were in bed and we were kissing because our polarity is real and we nurture it and we do it intentionally and it's a priority. And I was stroking her hair and she was like, I'm sorry, I'm just too tired. I can't. And I was like, neither can I. I wasn't going anywhere with this. I said, but I'll tell you what, baby, our best sex is not behind us. It's in front of us. I don't know when, I don't know how long it's going to be, but our best sex life is in front of us. And I meant it. I have no evidence that that's true, by the way, none whatsoever. But I meant it. I really meant it. That was the story, that right now we're in this, but hey, it's you and me, and the best is in front of us. And she kind of melted into my arms, and she could feel that. And that's our reality now. That's our reality now. Now, our romantic life is better, much better, now that the baby is older. But she's still a baby in the house, and we still don't get enough sleep, and it's not as good as it was before, and it's not as good as it's going to be. And I'm clear on that because that's the story that I wrote, and it's a persuasive story. I can make it a true story. Got it? But yeah, this really is such a critical question for so many of my listeners. So I really intentionally doing all of this sexual polarity stuff that I just talked about, intentionally doing it, making it a priority and a context for your relationship and your marriage will increase your wife's libido or your husband's libido. Like if you show up in feminine radiance for him over and over and over again, it will draw forth his masculine. It can't not, okay? Are there limitations to it? Of course. I mean, this is not magic. And it's not mind control, and it's not, putting a pill in somebody's drink. It's none of those things, right? We need to be realistic about what is, and people's libidos can drop for all kinds of very good biological reasons. You might want to see your doctor. There's a lot of options out there. But if you keep creating this sexual polarity context, it's going to make a big difference. It's going to draw forth something very real. So I can't promise it's going to get you everything you want, but I can promise it's going to get you part of the way. If you're willing to do it, not manipulatively and not like, I'm going to fucking make this work, but out of the true joy of being in your masculine with your woman, for your woman, and creating that context in your relationship, and vice versa if you're one. Whew. Okay, and that's all the questions. Thank you so much for showing up. Its course has been hugely popular. An unbelievable number of people signed up for it, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And as I expected, a very small number of people, relatively, a tiny percentage showed up live. And if you're one of them, I just want to say a heartfelt thanks, because you're really helping me co-create this program. These questions, and particularly, Dane, that last question about polarity and libido in a relationship, it's so crucial. And if I hadn't answered that question, then this course would be diminished. It would be less good, dramatically less good for real people, hundreds of people who will, maybe thousands, who will view it across years. And so you're really helping me fulfill an important mission, which is, going to make a lot of people happier. It's not going to, cause world peace or end hunger. I get it, but this stuff is really crucial to the happiness of a lot of people, and I so appreciate you showing up, and for yourself, and also for everyone else. So thank you, and have a wonderful night, and I will talk to you next week.